What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. Week 12 is gone. Week 12 is by us. There is 1 week left in the regular season. It's rivalry week, but before we start to preview that, we have to take a look back at what just transpired this past week, and I got to give you my top 5 takeaways from Week 12 of the 2023-2024 college football season. You guys can come away with more takeaways, but these are the 5 things that I learned, or at least I'm going to push forward here moving into rivalry week. So before we dive on into all that, you guys know I got to say thank you for all the support the channel has seen as of late. It means a lot to me. And if you want to continue to show your support for the channel, leave a like, comment, share. Those are some ways that you can help interact and thusly support the channel, but you can also hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, or you're doing a huge thing to support this channel just simply by watching the video. It means a lot to me. Whatever you guys are able to do to interact with the channel helps to support it, and it does mean a lot. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on into what we learned or what we saw in Week 12. We're going to start with what we saw here in Week 12, because what we saw in Week 12 is a lot of ranked teams, highly ranked teams on the road, teams that can get into the college football playoff in possible trap game scenarios. And there's one more that's not on the screen that I'm going to talk a little bit more about when we get farther down the line. But as far as these games right here, Texas had to go on the road to play Iowa State. Now, trap game because the Cyclones have played a lot better than expected so far this season. You just lost Jonathan Brooks last week, and CJ Baxter was going to have to take over. Well, he ran really, really well. Texas was in a battle with the Cyclones for a long period of time, but they were able to pull away there, win 26-16. It would have been a very Oregon thing to do, to go on the road and lose a game to Arizona State, but the Ducks were able to just absolutely blow the Sun Devils out of the water, 49-13. That game was not even close. What a tremendous first half that Bo Nix had 6 passing touchdowns. And then the 2 games to the right-hand side of your screen were the 2 games I think a lot of people were watching this week as far as trap game scenarios go. There, again, is one more. I think those of you out there that are huge college football fans know which one that is. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. But Louisville on the road against Miami. That's at the bottom part. That's at the bottom part of your screen down there. And the Hurricanes did give the Cardinals a lot of fits. But the Cardinals used some great efforts to be able to pull away from that one late. They clinch a spot in the ACC title game. You do have Kentucky coming up here next week, so that is definitely going to be an interesting game to watch. Definitely a game that can spoil Louisville's hopes at a college football playoff spot, but you win that game, you enter the ACC title game 11-1, and you're probably going to need some chaos to have happen, but you can state your case on why you should be in the college football playoff. The Cardinals have had an amazing season so far, and it continues with a road win in Hard Rock Stadium. And then the one that everybody was watching this week, Washington at Oregon State. And this was an absolute dogfight. The Beavers were not necessarily playing their best football in the first half, but they held Washington scoreless in the second half. They had their opportunities to be able to win that game, but the Washington defense continues to do what it's done all season long and gut out wins. Now, again, there is scrutiny that remains about a lot of these teams. Maybe not necessarily Oregon, but Louisville, again, they got off to that slow start, but they were able to come back and win. Are they going to be able to do that in the ACC championship game if they fall down to Florida State? Again, we'll talk about that team later as well. Texas, how is this offense really going to look down the stretch in the Big 12 title game without Jonathan Brooks? Can this Washington defense play a full 60 minutes if they're going to have to rematch with the Oregon Ducks in the Pac-12 championship game? There's a lot of scrutiny that remains about a lot of teams, again, including another team that's not on the screen that we'll talk about here in just a second, but there's still a lot that has to be worked out. And because a lot of these teams avoided the trap games, and because these teams avoided the chaos, there really was no chaos to speak of. And so the 9 teams that I've talked about for the past couple of weeks now will be the 9 teams that still have a shot to get into the college football playoff this upcoming week. Now, I'm not going to linger on this slide for too long because you guys have heard me have this conversation before, right? Out of the SEC, you have Georgia and Bama. They will play in the SEC title game, and barring any sort of upset from Georgia Tech and Auburn this upcoming week, the winner probably gets into the college football playoff, and the loser may not be so lucky unless it is Georgia. Then there's going to be some conversation to have happen. Florida State and Louisville will play in the ACC title game, all things considered, unless there is some sort of chaos. I don't believe that there's going to be any other matchup besides Washington and Oregon State, or not Oregon State, and Oregon. Apologies to Ducks and Beavers fans everywhere in the Pac-12 title game. And then obviously Ohio State and Michigan are going to settle things on the gridiron this week. Loser probably going to be out of the college football playoff race unless, of course, there is chaos that unfolds. And this is college football. Chaos can always unfold. But with the pattern of this season, hasn't really been the thing this season for chaos to reign. It just hasn't happened. It's been a lot of chalk this year. And don't get me wrong, it's been very, very exciting to watch, especially the likes of the Louisville Cardinals. Oh, and one team I didn't mention, Texas, too, will play in the Big 12 title game. Got to get passed through this last week and then win the Big 12 in order to get into the college football playoff, or at least have a shot to get into it. When conference championship week comes around, I'm going to be talking about a lot more scenarios, and we'll talk about this more later too. One of these teams on screen, and I bet you can guess which two I'm talking about, will likely not be as heavily in the race as they are this week. And I'm talking about Big Blue and talking about the Scarlet and Gray, in case you don't know who I'm talking about. Let's move forward here to number 3. Injuries could kill playoff hopes for top contenders. So last week, I kind of touched on it a little bit with the injury to Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, one of the best running backs in the country this season. And then when Texas went and played TCU last week, Jonathan Brooks went down. He ended up tearing his ACL, and he's going to be done for the season. Now, CJ Baxter is not a bad option in the running back room at all, and he's actually been running really well for Texas this season, and he had a pretty good game against Iowa State this past week, but with no slight to CJ Baxter, he is not as good of a running back as Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks has this explosiveness, this quick twitch ability that I think Texas is going to really miss against a team that they could play in the Big 12 championship. Maybe it's Oklahoma State, maybe it's Kansas State, maybe it's Oklahoma. We still really don't know. Again, there are some things that can work itself out there in the Big 12. But when you take a look at the Texas Longhorns without Jonathan Brooks, it definitely takes a huge hit to that offense. Now, Quinn Ewers is back healthy. You still got a lot of weapons at wide receiver, and the defense continues to play well. So CJ Baxter stepping in, wouldn't be too worried about that. But again, it could hurt Texas because they are farther down in those rankings. But the team that you should be really concerned about is the Florida State Seminoles. Tate Rodemaker had to take over because Jordan Travis went down with a lower leg injury. I believe it was ankle. I'm not really too sure what it was, but Jordan Travis is done for the season. No more Jordan Travis for Florida State this year. So that's definitely going to hurt the committee's outlook on Florida State because they don't have Jordan Travis. And now any conversation of Jordan Travis going to win the Heisman Trophy is also out of the window. Sadly for him, he's a really, really good quarterback. He's a really, really good player, and you never want to wish injuries upon anybody. So that is absolutely terrible to see Jordan Travis go down like that. But they struggled early with North Alabama. They got off to that slow start, and not an easy place to play this week when you have to go on the road and play the Florida Gators. And again, Florida, nothing to lose in that game. Florida State, everything to lose. It'll be very interesting to see if the committee ends up jumping Washington over Florida State. That's just going to be a very, very interesting thing to watch because now without their star Jordan Travis, and especially with all the slow starts they've been getting off to with him, it's definitely going to hurt Florida State's outlook at trying to get into the college football playoff. Now, if they win out, they're undefeated. They're definitely going to be in the conversation there if they can beat Florida and Louisville in the ACC title game. Even with Tate Rodemaker at quarterback, they likely will get a spot in the college football playoff based on how everything else above them is going to shake out. Again, Washington and Oregon are going to have to settle things in the Pac-12 title game most likely. Ohio State, Michigan are settling things on the field this upcoming week, but that's the team you should really be concerned about there. But injuries could kill playoff contenders' hopes. Definitely is going to put a damper on both Texas and Florida State's seasons the rest of the way and possibly hurt their chances to get into the college football playoff. Florida State so more than the Texas Longhorns. Let's get into number 2 here. We're going to keep this one pretty short because you probably could have learned this after last week's absolute demolishing of the Ole Miss Rebels. But it was really solidified for me this week when Georgia went on the road in a very tough place to play in Neyland Stadium, and maybe it didn't look super pretty early, but Georgia was able to pull it out. They dominated their way through the Tennessee Volunteers, held the Volunteers scoreless in the second half. They ended up leading 24-10 at halftime, 14 points in the third quarter, 38-10. Was the final score of that game. And it just proved to me that with all due respect to Ohio State, to Michigan, to Oregon, to Washington, and all the other top tier contenders, Georgia is still a little bit above on the national conversation ladder. Georgia to me is the absolute undisputed number 1 team in the nation. I do not think that is arguable right now. They are playing their best football of the season, and I think they're playing the best football out of any team in the entire country. Michigan has started to take a couple of steps back, and with all due respect to the Ohio State Buckeyes, who are also playing some really good football right now, Georgia just looks better. Georgia is starting to get back to the Georgia that we've seen in years prior. The offense is flowing and clicking on every cylinder you can imagine. The defense is still spectacular. They held a really good Tennessee offense to only 10 points. This has been an absolute dynamite performance here over the past couple of weeks for the Georgia Bulldogs. You could say it started out with that Kentucky game, and sure, there was that hiccup at Vanderbilt, but ever since then, they have dominated. Georgia Tech is going to be an interesting challenge for this team. However, likely with the way Georgia's playing, they're going to steamroll them yet again. And man, that game against Alabama in the SEC championship game, we'll really find out what Georgia is made of then, and likely solidify a spot in the college football playoff if they are able to win that game, or I should say will solidify a spot in the CFP if they are able to win. But Georgia right now, sorry, hit my microphone. Georgia right now looks like the best team in the country, in and out. I don't think it is arguable right now. I think the Dogs right now are the best team in the country. But let's take you to an early preview here of next week's game. I talked about it yesterday, or not yesterday, talked about it last week. It was my number 1 takeaway last week, was that Ohio State Michigan will be the biggest game of the college football season. Nothing has changed. However, with the lack of chaos this past week, I now have learned, and you should have learned out there as well, that with the margins between these two teams, absolutely razor thin. You take a look in the AP poll, Ohio State just jumped Michigan for 2. However, if you take a look at the total number of votes, it is very, very slim. The margin between these two teams as to who is ranked higher, none of it matters, though. You throw all of that out the window because everything will be settled in Ann Arbor this upcoming weekend. Now, there is the conversation to be had that Michigan has had a couple of slow games the past couple of weeks. You could have beat Penn State by a whole lot more than you did. Regardless, you were still able to get that win. And now Maryland gave this Michigan Wolverine team some trouble. They did. They gave Michigan a lot of trouble. However, Michigan, with as good of a defense as they have, they were able to step up, force a safety late in that game. In fact, the only points scored in that fourth quarter to be able to win the game. Maryland made a great comeback effort. They made a great stab at being able to knock this team down. However, they were not successful in doing so. Now, that's not to say Michigan is still not playing well. Michigan is still playing some good football, but it is not as good as it has been over the past couple of weeks. The same cannot be said for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Kyle McCord is really starting to settle in. He has this offense absolutely rolling, and this defense, even though it is not fully healthy, although it is expected to be for this game on November 25th in Ann Arbor, this is a Buckeye defense that is still playing very, very well. I think these are the best two defenses in the entire country that will be going at it, and the conversation will be which offense can break through that defense more often and maybe can break through it last, right? Michigan just got to 1,000 wins, and it was not pretty, but win 1,001 is definitely going to be their hardest of this college football season, at least maybe not the hardest of, well, their full entire existence, full entire tenure. But as far as this season goes, trying to get that one extra win. 1,001 is going to be really, really hard. And again, this game has everything on the line. A chance to go to the Big Ten championship game and likely winning the Big Ten title game now that you know that Iowa is on the other side. I think both Ohio State and Michigan would absolutely blow the brakes off of the Iowa Hawkeyes. But not only that, the loser, okay, you probably had a shot to get into the college football playoff last year. That's exactly what happened with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Same cannot be said for this year. There are just too many teams in the race, and unless absolute chaos unfolds, you have to go into this game thinking, hey, this is everything. This is your season. This is a chance to play for a title. Everything on the line in Ann Arbor this week. Boy, is this game going to be a fun one to watch. But that's all I got for this video. Please let me know any other takeaways you guys had in the comment section below. And hey, always remember to play hard but tailgate harder. And I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.